Hey everybody, Stephen Andrew here with ProverbsGuys Ministries. I have my favorite guest. I have third time interviewing now, and a dear friend of mine, Mary Nell Wyatt Lee. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Stephen Andrew?
I woke up this morning, so I'm highly blessed.
Me too. Me too.
Last time we talked, we went over your book, Battle for the Firstborn. It is no lie my
Mhm.
all-time favorite read. I have two copies here at my house. My wife has even become a huge fan of it now.
Oh.
And we're going to be going over Joseph in Egypt today.
Well, I was going to say, I think everybody's going to be surprised when they find out how important Joseph really was in more ways than one.
Absolutely. And for me, being a younger Christian just a few years ago, before I came across this awesome book, I never doubted the narratives of the scripture and I knew they were truth. But it always did make me wonder, if there are millions of Israelites in Egypt, why is there no traces of them? Or if Joseph was such an important figure, why can't we find any trace of him in Egypt history? But in fact, there is plenty of evidence for that, isn't there?
It's funny. Yes. Yes.
All right. I guess if you want, we can go ahead and walk down that line of who Joseph was in Egypt and his role in Egypt.
Well, I think it's important that people understand the story of Joseph. That I recommend that everybody go to their Bible and read the story of Joseph, how he was the favorite son of his father, Jacob, and how his brothers were so jealous of him that they tried to have him killed. They sold him when he came to see them when they were out in the field. They dug a trench or they found a pit and they tossed him in there. And some of them even wanted to kill him. But what happened is some Midianites came by. I think they were Midianites, and they sold Joseph to them. And they took him to Egypt and sold him. And they sold him to Potiphar, who was, an important man in Egypt. And everything was going great. Joseph had great favor with Potiphar until his wife decided that she wanted him. And she attempted to seduce him. And when he fled away, she told her husband that he had attempted to rape her. And so he went to prison. And he was so well liked in prison, he became the what would you call somebody in jail that is like an assistant or to the jailer, even though he was still in jail. And then finally, Pharaoh has his dream, and nobody can interpret his dream. And then somebody remembers Joseph, because Joseph, while he was in prison, he had interpreted the dreams of the prisoners. Here we have Joseph. He is brought as a prisoner before the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh tells him his dream. And, of course, with prayer, Joseph is able to tell him what it means, that there will be 7 years of plenty, and then there will be 7 years of famine. And the Pharaoh is so grateful and so thankful that he promotes Joseph. There's more to it than that, but
Right.
Joseph is promoted to the second only to the king. And what happens then is the Pharaoh put him over a procedure to gather the grain for this famine. So for 7 years, they're gathering grain. Every major city, and they didn't have a lot back then. There weren't a lot of major cities, but every city had their own granary. But there was one extra large granary, and it was positioned in a perfect spot where people coming from Canaan which is where all the Middle Eastern countries would come through. They would come right to this place and get their grain. Well, before Ron ever even did his Noah's Ark research or anything like that, I mean, he might have done research, but he was reading and studying everything that he could about ancient Egypt and all of everything that pertained to the Bible. And he came across um, an ancient writer, Herodotus, who gave some information and all, but let me take it, go in order.
Okay.
It's going to be Ron telling, okay?
Joseph appears to have been Imhotep, or Imhotep. It was he was the vizier, or second in command, of a third dynasty pharaoh named Zoser. Now, during Zoser's reign, there was a 7-year famine. Back in in 78, for example, when I first visited this area, there were some tombs open to the public that have been closed off since. But in the hieroglyphics in here, there were these two highly positioned individuals in Zoser's government that their claim to fame, or the reason that they asked the gods to allow them to have a high position in the hereafter, was that they had gathered grain for a 7-year famine. Well, in order to gather it for a famine, you've got to know the famine's coming. You can't gather it for a famine. You can say, I gathered the grain because we don't want to get caught with our proverbial pants down if another 7-year famine comes. But the way it was stated there was that they had done this for a 7-year famine. Mm-hmm. And so, all things considered, we believe that this Imhotep was Joseph because he lived to be 110 years old. He was second in command of the same Pharaoh, and the whole story fits that it was Joseph.
Okay, so Ron has explained who he thinks, who the evidence shows he believed was Joseph, that his name in ancient Egypt was Imhotep. There is only one person in all of history in Egypt named Imhotep. There's plenty of Ptahhoteps, Amenhoteps, the list goes on, but only one Imhotep. And I know that in translation, transliteration, and all of that Imhotep probably doesn't translate to I am Hotep, because Hotep means the mouth or voice of, and Ron thought it meant I am. The voice of I am.
Wow.
And he was the second in command of a pharaoh named Joseph. And so Joseph was in the third dynasty, way back, because it was only like 600 years after the flood when Joseph came down there. It wasn't, people have to understand that we don't have millions of years. The Bible makes it clear. You can actually do a chronology yourself, which Ron and I both did separately and came up with identical dates. So scholars and historians for a long time doubted that there really was somebody named Imhotep, because by the time of classical history, the Greeks elevated him to a god.
Yep.
He was the god of medicine, and he cured by dreams, and there's a whole lot in there, But anyhow, there came a time when they were studying and excavating around the step pyramid, which was the complex that Djoser had built, and they found a statue base, and it's only partial. It has the feet of the statue of Djoser, and then down below it has all the names and titles of Imhotep. Finally, they knew he was real. Okay? So, what evidence do we have to prove that Djoser was the pharaoh of the 7-year famine? You know? Well, there is evidence. Okay, so what we have here is a picture of what is called the famine stele. And what this stele says, this is a much later thing. It's not ancient. It's maybe 1,000 years or more after the time of Joseph. And it tells a very convoluted story about, it is put there by some priests who are presenting to the king, to the present pharaoh, that they want some land grants that were granted to them back during the time of Djoser. And on this stele, it tells about Djoser consulting his Imhotep, and it tells about the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. Now, it's all confused. That after 1,000 years, the story is convoluted, like I said.
Right.
All of the elements are there. They wanted their land grants and they wanted their tax exemption, like in the story of Joseph. So, right there, we have our proof. We have proof. There's Joser's name, 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty. And so, as Ron began studying it, he looked at the complex where Joser's, where his step pyramid is. The step pyramid is known to be the very first pyramid ever built in Egypt. And
Right.
around this pyramid is a massive complex. And as he began to study this place, he found that within this complex there were 11 grain bins. All other Egyptian cities had one large grain bin. This one had 11. And each of them fed into one main bin, like, as Ron will describe it later, like I don't know, they all fed down into here. And so when this ran down, like your bird feeder, you put some in here and it continues to flow. And now I'm going to let Ron talk to you a little bit about this. Now, this is old footage. It's not very good, but it's Ron talking.
Now, all of us are familiar with the Bible story of Joseph and the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine that God revealed to the Pharaoh in a dream, but he didn't understand what it was about, so he found out that Joseph interpreted dreams, and Joseph told him what the dream represented, and of course was given the job of saving the grain during the 7 years of plenty. Now, what you see here is the complex where this grain was sold and stored. Behind me are 42 stalls, and they do not have pedestals for statues of gods or this sort of thing, and they were stalls where people of different languages could purchase their wheat. Once they paid for it, they got some sort of a chit that they could take back to the grain storage bins, and once there, the grain was given to them. And you remember the story of where Joseph's brothers came down, they got their grain, and when they got out of town, they found that the money they had paid in these stalls here wherever there was somebody that spoke their language, had been secretly put back in their bags, which meant that Joseph had these people, had it all set up for them so that this would happen, because once they received their bags of grain, then they exited out through the back, a place that I'll show you when we get a little farther along.
Now, what's also interesting about this site is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually has also an entrance and an exit, right? Where you could enter in to collect your grain, and then without turning
Yes,
into people coming your way, you can exit out very efficiently.
yes. Yeah, Ron explained that. He's going to explain it in just a minute.
Where they went down to the area that was designed so that all of the grain from all of these 11 pits would funnel in there as it was removed from the bottom. And then once they got their grain, they exited down through this canyon in the back of the complex.
All right.
Okay, and so here's a picture of one of the grain bins. And you can see that there are holes at the bottom, where the grain flowed through. And the exit that he just talked about, you can see outside of the south wall, as people would go down to get their grain, they would come out outside of the complex. So there was no massive buildup of people coming and going. And because of this, all of the Middle East was saved from a terrible famine. And it's all because God used Joseph. But another thing that Joseph did that I don't think anybody knows is, well, let me back up. When the famine was in a few years, and Joseph's family came, and when Joseph became convinced that they were good people, and he forgave them because he saw the love they had for their youngest brother. Once upon a time, he was that young brother.
Yep.
But now they had Benjamin, and he saw the love they had for him. So the Pharaoh, Joseph told Joseph, said, bring him and your family, all of them here. We're going to give them the best of the land of Goshen, also called the land of Ramses, which has nothing to do with, a pharaoh named Ramses later, because Ra was, one of their gods.
Yep.
So it was here in the land of Ramses, the land of Goshen, that God provided a safe haven for the children of Israel, where they could grow and thrive. And they were not living with the Egyptians, because the Egyptians considered shepherds an abomination.
Right.
I don't know why, but they did. So more about, if we return to the step pyramid complex, as we look at this, we see a pyramid in there. Well, this was the very first pyramid ever built. And ancient records relate that it was Imhotep who was the architect of the first pyramid.
Yep.
That means Joseph.
Yep.
And so, how were these pyramids built? Well, let's watch this video clip here.
Now then, a blow-up of these strange objects that we see in the hieroglyphs up here is this. And you will notice that if you pull this curved lever downward, that this portion will be raised here. All right, now as a glyph, then we will find that this is just the right-hand portion of this glyph, and if in your imagination you can place another symmetrical mirror image of this object, then you have a lifting mechanism. Now, Herodotus, the father of history, a Greek historian that traveled with the Persian army and on his own in antiquity, states in his book that the pyramids were built in steps or different levels, and that the Egyptians used a contrivance made of short timbers that lifted the stone from one level to the other. So if we place this contrivance on the ground and then we place another one at a higher level, and then of course we can place them as necessary up the side of the pyramid, that the winch can be turned and the stone lifted, and of course it's lifted up and then moved over to a machine that's in the lowered position and lifted up and then moved to yet another machine, and by this method the stone can be lifted as high up the side of the pyramid as necessary.
And so when Ron heard about this description, when he read Herodotus's description of how the pyramids were built, he began to study all the area around the step pyramid. And this began in 78, probably 78 to 79. And he found inscriptions that he believed were parts of these machines that Herodotus had described. He was able to look at these inscriptions, and I believe that God gave him information, because some of this stuff is beyond human understanding. And so and so Ron built some of these machines, some of these devices. And he actually was allowed to build them on the second largest pyramid at Giza.
And being granted permission to put any kind of structure, even on the second biggest pyramid in Egypt, that is a huge undertaking, getting that kind of red tape cut.
Right. God definitely gave him grace and goodwill in there. And Ron became friendly with the then head of antiquities, whose name was Nasif Mohammed Hassan. And he saw Ron's devices, and Ron talked to him about it. And now I'd like to let you hear what Nasif Mohammed Hassan, the antiquities head in Cairo, said about these machines.
Great.
Evening to say a few words about the pyramid building machines is Nasif Hassan. He's the director of antiquities in Egypt, and he will give you an idea of what he believes about how the pyramids were built.
Now I am very glad to see that this machine, which Mr. Wyatt showed me, and I think maybe they used something like that, because there in hieroglyphs we know that this cartouche of Onis, a tomb in the western side of the Great Pyramid, and also this letter means Nefer, means the beautiful, and these three little signs exactly maybe show us another machine or another parts of machine or something like that, maybe of wood or maybe of anything else. And when I read about this machine which they use, I think it is suitable for lift each block for a stage to another, and they used many machines in order to lift these blocks of wood, and it is suitable for huge blocks of granite and for limestone. And the treatment which I have seen on the television or something here at Egypt, and it is a suitable thing to lift.
And so I thought maybe we would just let you see what happens when he tried to lift our van. I got to admit, this makes me think about when Jesus comes. We know what to expect. The Bible makes it clear that God's going to take care of us. Nothing's going to happen. But I got to admit that when Ron built this massive machine and put our fan on there, I was a little nervous. But anyhow, I sped it up a little bit so you could see it, and without it being so long. And then the final end to everything is look what it did for Egypt. As Ron said earlier, uh, Joseph became super wealthy, super wealthy. Before that, Egypt was not. It was just as he said, a small conglomeration of city-states, and they were not really connected with one another.
Right.
But now he was super wealthy, and that's why probably he wanted his a pyramid. Only I'm sure he didn't say build me a pyramid. He probably said I would like to have some sort of a monument. And interestingly, all the pyramids in Egypt are oriented to the east because Egypt worshipped the sun god. But this one, the step pyramid, is the only one that's oriented to the north. And we know that, Lucifer said he wanted to lift his throne to the sides of the north because that's where God's throne is.
Mm.
So it's very interesting. All of this is extremely interesting. But I really hope people will go to their Bible and read the story of Joseph, because there is such a message in there for us, for all of us.
Yes, amen. And there are tons of similarities between Imhotep and Joseph, and I jotted just a few of them, but the list went on and on.
Yes.
Both of them second in command to Pharaoh, both of them respected for their wisdom and great knowledge, both of them ruling during a great famine, both lasting 7 years, both known for building granaries and storage facilities.
Mm-hmm.
The longevity of their influence. Both of them were foreigners who rose to unusual heights. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found to be one of the most interesting facts is that Joseph married the daughter of a high priestess, and
Mm-hmm.
Imhotep, after marriage, became a high priest.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of coincidences to not be the same man, right?
Exactly. It is the same man. There's no doubt about it. And also, one thing you omitted was that both lived to be 110 years old. And, not too many people, well, some back then, some people did, but that particular number, it's so strengthening to your faith when you see the Bible come to life. And I think that God has given the world a gift, and very few want it. Very few are interested in it. The things that he revealed through Ron Wyatt, and I don't say that because I was married to him. I say that because I know they're true. I know. I've been all of these places, and it's amazing that people don't get so excited that they can't see straight. Because that's what happened to me the first time I heard him talk.
Right. Another interesting fact is that the body of Imhotep has never been found.
Right?
And we know that as Christians, it's because they took the body of Joseph with them when the children of Israel exited out of Egypt.
That's right. Yeah, they are continue to search for the tomb of Imhotep, and yet there is none.
So, okay, do you believe that there are actual Egyptian records that give more evidence to Joseph being Imhotep? Anything else we can point to?
I don't know. When I was writing that book, I spent a lot of time, at the Vanderbilt Library. I went to Harvard and different places looking for original excavation records. Um, by the time a discovery is made, by the time you learn about it, it's gone through so many hands and so many different ideas. And I don't know about that. I just don't know because they've uncovered so much. Now, as Ron said earlier in one of his videos, he said that there were in the tombs that are within the Step Pyramid that he found uh, tombs of people, higher ups in his um, government who said that they participated in grain storage for a 7-year famine. And I think that that right there says it all. Um, a famine would be one thing, but a 7-year famine, no, that, that can't be a coincidence.
I
So I don't know.
Do you think that some of the confusion of trying to locate Joseph in Egypt comes from us counting back from the Exodus? And typically, when they do that, for some reason, because of that wonderful movie, they always start with Ramses, which is not the
Yeah.
accurate pharaoh of the time of Moses. And then they kind of count
Yes,
backwards. Is that
yeah,
to
there's a
blame?
problem. There's a problem there. And the problem is, let me see if I can find these scriptures. When God made a promise to Abraham, he said, let me find it. When he did not withhold his son, when Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, he said, that all nations of the earth will be blessed because you've obeyed my voice. And let's see, and when the covenant was ratified with Abraham, the prophecy of 400 years given in Genesis 15:13 begins. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And everyone wants to think that they're going to be afflicted for 400 years.
Right.
What God said was all enclosed within 400 years. It began with Abraham and it ended at the Exodus. Again, it says, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. Okay, that doesn't mean they were in Egypt 430 years. It
Right.
means they were sojourning. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self same day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. Now, if you will go back 430 years, you'll be back, when Abraham came into the country, when he was granted his promise. And that's caused a lot of problems with people trying to figure out chronologies.
I
So I
agree.
think that's what you were talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, and that does cause a lot of confusion because when you have the wrong starting date, you're obviously going to end at the wrong end date.
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, do you think Joseph's influence introduced Hebrew ideas of God into Egypt at all?
I don't know. I don't know. Of course, you can remember at that time, Jacob's family, they were just a Semite family. They weren't called Hebrews then. They were just a family who came in there. And we know that by the time of the Exodus, the people as a whole had lost much of their knowledge of God.
Right.
They really had. And so I'm sure that for a while, that the God of Jacob, the God of Joseph, was recognized. But as pharaohs come and go, and this is something else to remember, and this is something that people don't understand, is there were many pharaohs reigning at the same time in Egypt. Egypt is this great, long country. It's desert. And wherever there's a oasis or a fountain or something like that can sustain life, people would settle there. And pretty soon they would have their own dynasty. And so there were dynasties they ruled in different places at different times. So that's why it's interesting when the Bible says there arose a king that knew not Joseph. Well, remember back when Cyrus and Darius, during the time of Daniel, when one of the kings, granted them permission to come and build, and then the build Jerusalem, and so a bunch of them went, Nehemiah and all of them went, and then one of the kings says, "Hey, wait, who gave you permission to do that?" And they said, "Well, such and such king gave us permission." And so that king had a search made to see if that other king, who was long gone, had written a decree. And he found out that he did. And even though that wasn't his decree, it was a way earlier king's, he said, "Okay, it's good," because he decreed it. The ancient kings all believed they were the earthly embodiment of their God.
Right.
And so when one king was gone and another one came, like in Egypt, they would say, "Oh, he flew away," and then another one came in and took his place. Looks kind of silly to us today, but that's what they believe.
Yeah.
So now, as far as any influence, that kind of influence was there, but I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any real evidence showing that a body of true God believing people were there, other than the Israelites.
Right. And I guess living in the land of Egypt, it wouldn't be too hard to eventually lose that knowledge. And that explains why God
Absolutely.
was so, you know, precise about don't do this the way the Egyptians do, don't do this the way the Egyptians do. He knew it was going to take time for the children of
Yeah.
Israel to shed the Egyptian ideologies they had picked up.
Right. Yeah. And now they were separated. They didn't live together, but then for a while when they were enslaved. Now, how long were they enslaved? Okay, we know it happened about the time Moses was born, right? Because it says that the king, you know, made slaves out of them and had the midwives. They told them to throw all the male babies into the river. So that started with the birth of Moses. And then Moses fled at age 40. He came back at age 80 and led the children out of the land of Egypt. So they were only enslaved for 80 years. But those 80 years that they were enslaved by the Egyptians probably gave them, they had they were around the Egyptians. and they lost a lot of their culture.
Now, did you and Ron ever specifically go out looking for artifacts or places that could help place Joseph?
No, he did all of this work before I married him. I married him in 1988, and he did all of this research in the 70s. And he had already uh, completed all of that and done all his research. Now, we would go to the Step Pyramid complex and look around. But by the time I came along, Egypt was tightening up, um, the ability to go into these tombs freely. Back in the 70s, Ron was able to.
Now, part of the issue with connecting Israelites to Egypt is that Egyptology holds very small, close narratives, and if your information doesn't fit within that narrative, they are not willing to examine evidence to change it. Is that
No,
correct?
no, they won't. That'll never happen. No, it's human nature.
But why do you think it is? Do you think that that would take
It-
something away from Egypt history?
It's ego. I've dealt with these scholars before, believe me, and it was not something that was a fun experience. They look down their nose at you, especially anything relating to the Bible. There's very few. One of the few that I really appreciated was Bryant Wood, who's still around, I think, who back years and years ago, there was research done in Jericho. And then Kathleen Kenyon came along and redid it and threw out all of the evidence that showed Jericho was a city exactly in the time period of the entry into the
Yep.
promised land and all. And Bryant Wood found out that as an archaeologist, he had access to information, and I guess I may not be telling the story exactly accurately, but he believed, well, she had found all of these scarabs from the cemetery at Jericho. And these scarabs all were the names of the Egyptian pharaohs and their family. And it was, I guess, presumed that these were good luck charms. If these people had this scarab and they wore it on a necklace or something like that, it would bring them good luck. So they would bury them with them. And she had hidden all of these because they pointed exactly to the 18th dynasty when the Exodus did happen.
Mm.
So what he did is he, did his research, and he absolutely stands by the fact that this is the time of the Exodus, of the evidence at Jericho. So there are some. I shouldn't condemn them all, and they probably would look at me and laugh, because who am I? I'm nobody. Ron was certainly nobody, but God. It's funny how he uses the simple to confound the wise. And what I find is that with a lot of Ron's discoveries, I find that the people who accept it and are so excited and so overwhelmed, they just can't stand it. They're so excited. They're just simple folk. But the Holy Spirit bears witness. And thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for that. Okay. We have people who come here who are so overwhelmed and so thankful that God has given them something to, to just secure their beliefs. I mean, they had faith anyhow. But Jesus didn't, when Thomas was doubting, Jesus didn't fuss at him. He didn't fuss at him. He said, okay, here's my hands, you can see. but blessed are those who believe without seeing, you know. But you're blessed too because you did get to see. And I think I think all of us realize that Jesus is coming back soon. I don't know how soon that is. It seems like every year I say this, it's got to be this year, it's got to be soon. And Ron was the same way. He died in 99, but I think God has to put that in us to make us do the work, you know?
Yeah.
Because if we get lazy and say, oh, I don't think he's coming anytime soon, so I think I'll, go to Florida and lay on the beach or something like that. He's got to keep us. There's a work to be done, and it's going to take a long time in us, you
Right.
know. And what we're supposed to do, where the nation of Israel failed, is we're supposed to draw others to Jesus through our influence, through our actions, through whatever we can do. And Israel, that's what they were supposed to do, but they didn't. They shut everybody else out. And they were, So it's an interesting time to live, don't you think?
I would say absolutely. I was doing an episode on Joseph in Egypt with my tech guy from Greece not long ago, about 6, 7 months ago. And
Hmm.
there was a woman on there who is an atheist, and she claims to be an Egyptologist. And she came on just railing about how wrong we were and how we're incorrect. And I just felt the Holy Spirit tell me, ask her how many times she's been to Egypt. So I asked her, I point blank, how many times, how many trips have you made? One. She's an Egyptologist with the degrees, and she's
Yeah,
considered an authority to make these kind of statements, but she's only been to Egypt one time. How can you possibly learn all of Egypt history in one visit and know these to be facts? And this is what we're dealing with, but laymen like me, we don't always understand that. So when they tell us counter, we don't push back when we ought to.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's only been a few days now since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And you look at what he did. I hear people talking about it, and um, he he spoke with logic, and he welcomed your opinion. What do you have to say? And that infuriates people. And so I think he was a good example where Jesus said, "They hated me, and they're going to hate you." And that's the way it's going to be. But we can't let that stop us. We've got to keep going because it's how are people going to come into the kingdom of heaven if they don't learn, if they don't have someone helping them to learn?
Right. Now, my next question for you, and you can opt out if you want to. I won't be offended.
Okay.
But we can kind of understand why Egyptians would not want to put any effort in to change their narrative of history. But why do you think it is that there's some pushback from different creation entities that don't help do the research that you and Ron have done to help solidify our faith? Like, what are they afraid of?
Well, my experience was that Satan is able, there's some people that speak the right words, act like they're doing the right thing, but Satan can still control them. And he places a hatred in them for Ron Wyatt or anything that Ron Wyatt says. And I saw this, it was really funny when we first got married, and I thought, oh wow, I'm going to meet some of the greatest Christians. What a life this is going to be. Whoa, whoa, was I wrong? All of these people that that claimed to be Christians did the most horrible things to Ron, said the most horrible things. And it took me a while to get used to that. I can't say that, well, I mean, I was not expecting that. I wasn't. I was a new Christian, a
Right.
new true believer. I mean, I was raised, but my mother is to this day the most precious Christian woman, and she raised me that way. But you know how things happen to us, and we get away from it.
Right.
And so I just, I was so shocked, so very, very shocked. And all I can say is that Satan, Satan's able to control people. He is. If we're not constantly on our guard, I was thinking about this recently because I told you I broke a rib.
Right.
Okay, and I didn't go to the doctor or anything because I know there's nothing they can do for it. You just got to let it heal up. But I was thinking all the things that happen to us that it's all it's satanic. It's the powers of darkness, and they hate us. And if God will not allow them to kill us, sometimes I think He allows them to try us, just like with
Job.
Job. hmm And so ever since I broke my rib, it really got my attention, and I have been getting on my knees and praying, please protect us all from evil, please send your angels to surround us and to protect our home, our family, everything, because he is he is going to needle us to death if we're not close to God.
No
If
doubt.
we don't stay close to Jesus and pay attention and pray and realize what's going on. Sometimes I think if I could look around here and see the unseen world here, the battles that are going on around all of us, it would scare us to death.
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah.
And I just think we're at a very unique time in history. And
I
I'm
will.
glad to be here.
I'll say this on my ministry's TikTok channel. We post shorts with Ron Wyatt, and they get thousands and thousands of views. One of them has 300,000 views, and we get maybe two negative comments about Ron Wyatt, and then 20 more positive comments about young people my age and even younger who are fascinated with it. They're just learning about Ron for the first time. And it's so exciting for me because I get to comment them back and tell them, look, if you think this is awesome, go to ronwyatt.com YouTube channel and your mind will be blown.
Mhm.
But the younger
Oh,
generation, they are receiving this information and they're eating it up.
oh, that is so good to hear. So good to hear. I know that our young people, I mean, nobody wants their children or their grandchildren to be lost. Nobody. And I don't want anybody else's children or grandchildren to be lost either. So thank you for telling me that. That's very exciting.
And, my ministry, we have two set agendas now. It's to win souls for God's kingdom, and it's to help vindicate Ron Wyatt and help push his research. And we've been
Well, don't
successful.
worry. Yeah, don't worry about vindicating Ron, but vindicate what God did through Ron. You know, Ron didn't care. I mean, people did all kinds of horrible stuff to him, and he would just say, "Bless their heart," and pray for them. But God did this, not Ron Wyatt, and
Yep.
it's amazing. And
It's
I'm so thankful for people like you. I really am.
I think it's really important because, for so many years we've been told that there's no evidence left, that there's nothing to point
Yeah.
to Joseph in Egypt. And we're even
hmm
being told that by Christian ministries. And then no, that's not the case. Like we have we have the evidence that we're looking for to answer our questions like I had. And that's why I think it's so important that they do know about Ron's research and what God did through him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, if I could just ask one more question and then we could
Sure.
wrap this up. Um,
Alrighty.
some people might say something along the lines of, what does it matter finding Joseph in Egypt? It's 3,000 years ago. What does it matter?
Well, if you're already a believer, then it doesn't matter. It becomes a salvation issue when you just don't believe the Bible. We have people who say, I already have faith. I believe every word in here. I don't need that. That's great. That's great for them. But I do know that there's a world of people out there who don't believe the Bible. They don't believe a word of it. And it's like a golden string all the way through the Bible, all the evidences that God has revealed, all the way. And they all make sense, and they're all in the right and proper place. And so if someone is on the fence about, is this Bible real? Can I trust it? Take a look at these things. If you already have faith, then it's not a salvation issue. But it can strengthen your faith. I'll say that.
Amen. Well, Miss Mary, now it's always great interviewing you. You're honestly my favorite person to interview, and this is number 3, but I can't wait for number 4 when we're going to be talking about Moses in Egypt and then identifying Moses.
Yep. I look forward to that too.
Is there anything that you didn't think we touched on today that is important to touch on?
No, I think we covered, I started to say all the major points, but I think we covered a lot of everything. I really do.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut it, and I just really appreciate you coming, and I always do.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to doing one on Moses.
Get Battle for the Firstborn. You can get it at ronwyatt.com. Just click on the picture of the book, and that'll take you right to the store, correct?
Right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.